So, to sort of bring this together a touch. So we've looked at kind of what abuse might be, how to resource yourself should you start to want to talk about this, or to speak to go to a legal route, speak to your family. So you might have looked back at what has happened to you. Something's wrong. You then maybe find the right specialist support, so you feel supported in starting to talk about that with a professional, form your own opinion, your own language around it. What would the process then be for an abuse survivor? Perhaps if they wanted to take a legal avenue, what would they do next?
So, first things would be we'd be advising to report to the police. If it leads to a criminal prosecution, that's one thing. If the abuse is dead, if it's insufficient evidence, that's another issue which we often have to face. People need to remember someone like Jimmy Savile was never charged or convicted of abuse, but we know balanced probabilities he was a child abuser. After the criminal process is concluded, either positively with a conviction, or if not, because of insufficient evidence or abuse is dead, is to then pursue a civil action. We would look to rely upon the police statement as a key piece of evidence. We don't want abuse survivors to repeat their abuse to us all over again and cause additional trauma. There will be additional questions we probably will have compared to the police, with total respect to them. We would then send a draft letter of claim to the defendant, in this instance, the boarding school. They would have 3 weeks to acknowledge it, and then 3 months to provide their substantive liability response. That's them saying, yes, we agree, the abuse happened. We agree that we should be held vicariously liable. So that means that we should be held responsible for the actions of the alleged abuser, and that we now want to negotiate. Alternatively, they may say you're out of time to bring a civil case. You should have started your civil case by your 21st birthday and registered it at court, and you're out of time, and we can't have a fair trial now because documents are destroyed, abusers are dead, witnesses are no longer available, or maybe we dispute the abuse. There's no convictions. How can you prove that this man is an abuser, or the abuse did not take place during the course of his employment? It's totally separate to his role at the school. So what happens is that we get the police statement, we meet the client, we send the letter to the school. They have, let's say, 4 months for ease to come back to us with a response. They admit it, they want to address the matters, or they deny it. If they admit it, during those 4 months, we would arrange for you to see a consultant psychiatrist, a medical expert, to provide their opinions on any injuries you've suffered, including psychiatric injuries. When do they start? What's the severity? What's the impact on your life in relation to education, employment, relationships, drink, drugs, self-harm, gambling? Not from just when the abuse started, but continuing. What therapy is recommended? How much is there need for kind of further courses of therapy if there's relapses over the rest of your life? And crucially, what caused it? Was it because your parents divorced when they were 10? Was it because your grandmother died when you were 12? Was it because you saw your dog got run over when you were 13? Or was it because you suffered significant and serious sexual abuse from your housemaster or teacher or someone else? What caused it? What was the material contribution? Because again, we appreciate everyone's lives is formed by different manners. We're not trying to retrospectively reattribute all issues in your life to the abuse, but often the abuse is the common thread and the main and significant factor, because it happened during that key developmental stage of your life, and it's the thing which you have potentially flashbacks or memories or triggers of, which you don't have for the other issues I just mentioned. Now, if they admit liability, if they say we want to engage in negotiations, we would use that report to negotiate with the other side in relation to the kind of pain and suffering elements. That's the personal loss to you, the personal injury and loss to you, but also looking towards special damages. And that means the cost of past therapy and travel, cost of future therapy and travel, potential self-harm, corrective surgery, potentially education and employment impact. So let's say you didn't go to university and become a graduate, but all of your family did, and both your parents went to university and all your peers went to university. That graduate earnings gap is significant. Let's say you did start work, but you have to be self-employed. You can't be a lawyer in a law firm. You can't work with people, let alone be managed by someone who's in a position of power over you, like a partner. And you definitely can't manage staff and deal with their personal issues because they get to know you too well. And that creates barriers. All of those can affect your earning capacity. If they deny it, we need to consider, do we need to start court proceedings or not? Now, the only work I do is in the High Court in London, which is one of the highest courts in the country. 99.9% of our clients want to remain anonymous, and that's totally possible. As a sexual abuse survivor or a child abuse survivor, we will obtain an anonymity order in the High Court, which means no one can publish any details or identify you in any manner. And if we do start court proceedings, only about 2%, 2 to 3% of cases go to an actual trial. The vast majority of them will settle prior to trial. So it's a really important fact. And we don't say that to give comfort to you or to your viewers. It is a true figure because we have to consider as a firm, predominantly we act on a no-win, no-fee basis. How much money do we need to have a reserve in the kind of litigation bank to fund the case from now up to a potential trial? So that's how we do it. And in relation to settlement, we try to achieve not just a financial settlement, but if possible, to achieve an apology, which means a lot to people. You'd be surprised in that sorry is often the hardest word. It also doesn't cost you anything to say sorry, and yet it is the hardest thing to achieve. So to get apologies is significant. Meeting the school can be quite cathartic if you go back to the school or if you meet at a lawyer's office or your house or wherever else. But meeting the school and giving your lived experience to say, we appreciate you're a new head teacher, but if anyone ever suffers abuse in your school from a different teacher or housemaster or just has mental health issues from other factors, this is what you should do to make them feel able to talk and to express these issues. So meeting the school, apologies, compensation, is really, really important. And then lots of our clients do media as well to raise awareness. And that in itself helps to chip away at the cycle of abuse. An adult trying to process a child's emotions and actions is never going to work. So that's why we say, again, therapy is not just at the outset disclosing, but at these other key stages. And things like triggers are really important, whereby some people say, I'm absolutely fine. But the next thing you know, they've seen someone who looks like their abuser. A song will come on, which is from the same period as when they were abused. They see a car that's same color. They will smell a certain food or a certain aftershave, which reminds them of their abuser. All of those can be triggers. So again, therapy is really important for that, not just at the beginning, but also during the process, if possible. It is key, but again, specialist therapy. So not, with total respect, waiting 9 to 12 months for the NHS to have a general specialist who deals with, bereavements on a Monday, divorce on a Tuesday, stress at work at a Wednesday, sexual abuse on a Thursday. It has to be someone who has specific training, who will understand what can and can't be done and the time scale to kind of process these things. We had one case whereby someone saw a therapist and she started crying during the second session when he was disclosing the impact of the abuse on his life. That guy has never seen a therapist again, and that traumatized him so much that the way the therapist reacted, he put him back about 20 steps because he didn't want to be pitied. He didn't want people to display, to cry when he's talking about these issues. He didn't want that. So she wasn't a specialist. It caused her trauma. It wasn't safe for her either. And there's no criticism of the therapist, but it's, again, specialist therapist who knows what they're doing and someone you can bond with. It is so key and so important. Otherwise, it just doesn't work, and it can actually cause more trauma because you just feel like you don't get it, or you're looking at it a bit weird. Do you get me? Do you understand me? Reinforces all those feelings about judgment. It's my fault. You don't understand. I don't want to talk to you about it. It can be really difficult. So I think having the right therapy when you feel able to have so is really key.